In this video, we are going to integrate Three.js with Django. So what you see over here is a scene with some objects defined in our Django database. And we can move around the scene to see how those objects look like. We can add new shapes directly from the Django administration. We have three choices: sphere, box, and cylinder. And yeah, this is basically a first step if you are thinking to create a 3D product configurator. So if you do, make sure to watch this video to the end. Before we get started, let's take a look at what have I done so far. So as usual, I created a brand new Django project, and currently I'm inside of the core directory in the settings.py file. So if we scroll down to the installed apps list, you will notice that I've created a shapes application which is visible below the core directory. Next, let's scroll to the templates section. Over here, I told Django where to look for additional templates. And inside of this templates directory, we are storing our base HTML. This is a very simple file with Bootstrap CSS, although we won't actually need it. And then we have blocks for the scripts and the content. So in our main HTML, we will place something in the block scripts additionally and in the block content. So as the next step, let's take a look at the views.py inside of the shapes application. Over here, I have just a simple home view, which is a function view, and we will do some coding over here pretty soon. This view is registered in the URLs.py file of the shapes directory, and the URL patterns over here are registered in the main URL patterns. Okay, so over here they are included. Next, let's take a look at the models.py file, which is empty. We will begin coding from this particular file. Then we have the main HTML. So as mentioned before, it inherits from base HTML. And over here, we have the CDN for the Three.js. Here we will have to pass some variables, some data from our database to our main.js script, which is attached over here. Inside of this main.js, we just have, for now, console log hello world. And yeah, this is basically it. This is how our page looks like at the moment. If we right-click inspect, we can see this hello world over here. And one more thing that I did was to create a super user. So I'm currently logged into the Django administration. So let's move to shapes models.py file. And over here, we are going to create a class for storing the shapes that will appear in our scene. So in order to get started, let's write a shape class. It will inherit from models.model, and it will contain two fields: the type, and this is going to be a models char field with the max length of 1, and the choices are going to be set to shape choices. So above this class, I'm going to create a shape choices variable, and this is going to be a tuple of tuples. So first we will have the number 1 option, which is going to be a sphere. Then we will have the box, and we will also have the cylinder. Okay, and now I'm going to refer to the choices as shape choices. The second field is going to be the color, and this is also going to be a models char field. And here I'm going to place the max length of 7, and I'm going to set the help text that here we should enter hex colors. All right, so let's also add a string representation method, and let's just return str self ID. All right, so I'm going to save this, and then I'm going to jump into the admin py. I'm going to register our class in the models py file, defined in the models py file in the Django administration. So from .models, we want to import shape, and then admin site register shape. Perfect. Let's save this, and let's move to the views py file. Over here, we need to create or retrieve the shapes and prepare them in the proper format so we can pass them to the JavaScript file. So in order to do this, I'm going to create a shapes variable, and I'm going to first maybe import the shape from the models. And here I'm going to use list comprehension. So I'm going to write an empty dictionary for now, or X in shape objects all, and we will create some shapes objects in just a few seconds. So we will have the type, and this is going to be X type, and we will also have the color, and here we will have X color. Okay, so we are referencing with this list comprehension and with the use of X, the type field and the color field, and we are placing it in a dictionary, and this is all placed inside of the shapes variable, which is a list. So next we need to import JSON, and we need to convert this into a JSON string. So what I'm going to do is to write a variable shape JSON, and this is going to be equal JSON dumps, and we are going to pass in our shapes. All right, and now we need to pass the shape JSON to the main HTML template. So I'm going to pass them as shapes, and to this key I'm going to assign the shape JSON. All right, so let's save this and let's move into the main HTML. Over here we need to grab our shapes from the view and pass them to main.js. So I'm going to open up a script tag, and then inside of the script tag I'm going to create a variable called shapes, and this is going to be equal JSON parse, and then we need to pass in our shapes with the applied safe filter. Okay, and then let's console log the shapes. So for now it should be an empty array. Let's save this and let's check it out. No such table shapes shape. Okay, so we forgot about one very important step to run the migration. So Python manage py make migrations, and Python manage py migrate. Okay, let's run the server, and we have an empty array, so everything is working. So now let's go to the Django administration, let's reload the page, and let's head over to shapes, and let's create 3 shapes. I want you to create 1 sphere, 1 box, and 1 cylinder, and pick the colors of your choice. All right, welcome back. So I hope you managed to add 3 shapes. So these are mine. I have 1 sphere, 1 box, and 1 cylinder. Okay, so the last thing that I want to check is to see if this array consists of our shape objects. Let's reload the page, and there they are. Okay, so these are JavaScript objects right now. Okay, let's jump into main.js, and here I'm going to remove the hello world, and let's begin by creating a scene. So A scene is going to be a place where we will put our 3D objects. We will also define some lights, and we will also have a camera. So the camera will be defined next, but first let's create the scene, and this is going to be new 3.scene. Okay, so now as the next step, let's place in the camera, and the camera will define the perspective through which we will view this particular scene. So let's write const camera is equal to, and then new 3 perspective camera, and here we will need to pass a few parameters. But before we discuss them, let's fix a small mistake. I forgot to add an A. There we go. And now we need to define the field of view. So this is the angle for how much we see vertically. And higher values widen the view but shrink the objects, while the lower values narrow the view but enlarge the object. So here I'm just going to place in 75. Next, we need to talk about the aspect ratio, which is width to height ratio of what the camera sees. Here I'm going to place window inner width divided by window inner height. All right. Next, we will have the near clip plane, and this is the closest distance for seeing objects. I'm going to place in 0.1, and then we will have the far clip plane, and this is the farthest distance for seeing objects. So anything beyond isn't shown for a smoother performance. Here I'm going to place in 1000. Perfect. Next, I'm going to reference the camera position on the z-axis and move it by 5. Next, we need to create a renderer. And a renderer takes the 3D scene and the camera settings and produces a 2D representation on the screen. So let's write a variable const renderer is equal to, and then new 3 WebGL renderer. All right, now let's set the renderer size. Here I'm going to refer to the window inner width and window inner height. All right, now we need to append the renderer's DOM element to our scene box, which is defined over here. Okay, so let's create a variable scene box, and this is going to be document get element by ID. We are grabbing this element by the scene box ID, and then we will write scene box append child, and we will access the renderer DOM element. All right, so yeah. Now we need to create an animation loop, and we will do it with the use of animate function, which is going to be an arrow function. Here we will reference the renderer and call render. We will pass in the scene and the camera, and then we will schedule the next animation frame by creating a recursive loop for animating. So we will write request animation frame, and we are going to pass in animate. So let's save this and let's see if this will work or we made some mistakes. I'm going to hit refresh, and we have cannot read properties of null reading append child. So let's go to main HTML. Over here, I'm going to add the defer attribute, and this will delay the execution of the script until the entire HTML page has been parsed. So let's add it very quickly. Let's save this. Let's reload the page one more time. And now we don't see any errors, but the screen, the page is still blank. So let's go to main.js, and we forgot to call the animation loop. I'm going to save it right now. I'm going to reload it one more time, and there we go. Here is our scene. As the next step, let's create a ground. So let's do this above the animation loop. And here I'm going to create a plain geometry. And this is going to be equal new 3. And then we are going to reference the plane geometry with capital plane, okay, with capital P. And here I'm going to give them dimensions 10 of 10. But we also need to reference the material. So let's create a material for the plane. And this is going to be equal new and then 3. And we will reference for now the mesh basic material. And let's make it a blue color. So over here, I'm going to write 0x000 and then FF. All right, now we finally need to add a mesh. And this is going to be a combination of our geometry and the material. And this is going to be the actual object we will see in the scene. So let's write plane is equal to and new 3, and then let's write mesh, and then we need to pass in the plane geometry and the plane material. Finally, we need to add this plane to the scene. So let's write scene, add, and let's pass in the plane. All right. Let's save this, refresh, and this is our ground. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to rotate the geometry on the x-axis. So let's write plane geometry and then rotate x by 30 degrees. And there we go. This is looking much better in my opinion. To make this effect even cooler, I'm going to add a fog. So we will have a nice smoothing between the background, between the scene and our ground, okay? So let's go to main.js and let's start by defining a color. So we will have a variable fog color is equal to, and I want to make this maybe black. All right, next we will have the fog near, which is the start of the fog. So I'm going to write fog near. And here we will have 2, for example. And let's add fog far, which is going to be 8. And this is going to be the end of the fog. Okay, so let's write scene fog is equal to, and then new 3 fog, where we are going to pass in now the fog color, fog near, and fog far. All right, so let's try this out. I'm going to save this, refresh, and now we have this smoothing effect, okay? So we could play around with the fog near and far. Let's save this. Okay, if I place it 0, it would look like this. I'm going to keep it to 2, and yeah, I'm pretty happy with this result. Next, let's work on our shapes. So first of all, I'm going to write a new variable, and this is going to be 3.js shapes. This is going to be an empty array, and we will need it for later on rotating our shapes. Now let's write a for loop for const L of shapes. We are going to now destructurize our element, and we are going to pick up the type and the color. So let's write const, and then from the element we are going to pick up the type and the color. So below, let's write console log type and color. Let's save this. Let's reload the page, right click inspect. Let's go to the console, and over here we have the types and the colors. Okay, so below, I'm going to comment this actually, and below I'm going to define a let geometry, and here we will have a switch by the type. So the first case is going to be 1, and here we will have a geometry for the sphere. So new, and then 3 sphere geometry. Sphere geometry. Okay, I hope I didn't make any typo. I'm going to place in the dimension parameters, and I'm going to place in break. All right, so this is for the sphere. Then we will have another case, which is 2, and 2 refers to the box. So here we will have the geometry redefined as new 3, and then box geometry. And I'm also going to put in some parameters. All right, and let's break it. And then we will have, let's say, the default. So this is going to be case 3. So default like this. And here I'm just going to paste in some settings. We have the radius top, radius bottom, and the height generated with the use of math random. We have the radial segment set to 32, and we created the cylinder geometry according to those settings. So we need to write in break. And yeah, basically we are done with the switch right now. We just need to now add the material, create the shape, and randomly position those shapes with some range. So let's begin with the material. So I'm going to write material is equal to, and I'm going to use the mesh pong material. So here I'm going to place in new 3 and mesh pong material. Mesh pong material. I hope I didn't make any spelling mistakes, and actually I did. It should be pong with an H. And here I'm going to set the color as the color. All right. So we have the material. Now let's create the shape. New 3 and then mesh. And here we will pass in the geometry as well as the material. All right. So now let's take care of the positioning of those shapes. So let's write shape position x is equal to math and then random minus 0.5 and then times 5. This is for the x-axis. Let's do one for the y. Here we will also have math random times 2 minus or plus 1. Okay, and let's do for the z-axis, and this is going to be equal math random minus 0.5 and times 5, just like with the x-axis. All right, and finally, what we need to do is to add this shape to the scene. So let's write scene, add our shape. And we also want to add this shape to our Three.js array. So let's write Three.js shapes push shape. Okay. Let's reload the page. And we don't see any shapes. So there are a few issues over here. So first of all, we are referencing over here the Meshpong material. And this type of material requires lightning. We didn't add lightning just yet. So for now, I'm going to take the mesh basic material and place it instead of this Meshpong material. Okay, let's save this. And now let's reload the page. And here are our shapes. So at the moment, these are cylinders. And this is because everything goes into the default. So to fix this, we need to go to the views and make this an integer. Okay, let's save this and let's reload the page one more time. And now, as you can see, we have the box, sphere, and the cylinder. Perfect. So let's go back and let's make this mesh basic material back to Pong material. And then I'm going to add some lightning, and I'm going to add an ambient light and a directional light. So we have different types of lights. Ambient, directional are two types, but we also have point and spotlights. So here we will use the ambient light, which is the overall background light, and the directional light, which is a light that shines in a specific directions. And this type of light creates shadows and basically makes everything look 3D. So yeah, let's save this and let's try this out. So now, as you can see, in spite of that, we have the Meshpong material. With the lights, we actually are able to see our shapes in colors. So if I turn out this lightning and reload the page, now these shapes aren't visible. If I bring the lightning back, we see them. Okay. Super. So now we can add rotation to our shapes. In order to do this, we need to head over to our animation loop, and then we need to reference the Three.js shapes and perform a for each on them. So we will have each individual shape rotated according to the settings that we are going to provide down below. So let's take the shape, let's access the rotation on the x-axis, and we will change it by 001, and let's do the same on the y-axis, rotation y, and let's add 001. So I'm going to save this and let's try this out. And now, as you can see, maybe not on the sphere, because you have to look very carefully on the sphere to see that it's actually rotating. But for our cylinder and for our box, you can clearly see that these shapes are in fact rotating. So these shapes are a little bit darkened by the fog. In order to see this effect, how the fog affects our shapes, we can comment out the fog just for a second. Let's reload the page, and right now you can see those shapes much more colorful, okay? But I'm going to bring the fog since I really like this effect. And I'm also going to bring in orbit controls. So at the top, I'm going to perform an import. So I'm bringing orbit controls from over here. And then we can go somewhere above the animation loop. And here I'm going to write const controls is equal to new orbit controls. I'm going to pass in the camera and then renderer DOM element. Let's save this. Let's refresh. And now we basically see nothing. This means that we probably have an error. And the error is uncut syntax error, cannot use import statement outside a module. So what we need to do is to head over to main HTML, and we need to set this script as a type equal module, and then with this module type specific script, we will be able to use import statements like we did over here. So I'm going to now refresh the page, and there we go. I'm going to reload the page one more time, and now we should be able to move around. Yes, in fact, we are able to move around and see how those shapes look like with the ground. Perfect. So the final thing is to add a new shape. I'm going to add a box. I'm going to set some color, save. I'm going to hit refresh. And now we have two boxes, okay? So let's add another shape. Let's make it a cylinder, save. And there we go. Right now we have two cylinders, one sphere, and two boxes. All right, guys, so this is it for this particular tutorial. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, consider leaving a like, comment, and subscribing to the channel. And I hope to see you guys in the next one.